Hey guys, it is officially spooky season, my favorite time of year, and today I have a very special tutorial for you. Here is the cat eye zipper pouch. And in this tutorial I am going to show you how to do all of the stitches to make a bag like this. And I'm going to show you how to attach a zipper, and I think the most important part, we have a lining. Look how fun this one is. We've got skulls and bones, and I bought this lining probably like 2 years ago for another project, and I finally convinced myself it's time to do a lining tutorial. And if you have a sewing machine, the lining section will be a little bit quicker for you, but you can also hand sew this entire project, and it does go pretty quick as well. So yeah, let's head on into my studio and I will show you how to crochet this and how to do some sewing. So for this project, I am using the same green that was listed in the pattern. This is actually Crow and Crescent in their new colorway Slimer, which is absolutely perfect for cat eyes. And for the base, I am using Madeline Tosh, Tosh Vintage in Ultramarine, and this is left over from another pattern that I had worked on. And I might regret using this one because I need about 63 yards for the zipper pouch and the size that I'm making. And this is about 64 yards. So we're getting real close to not having enough, but I'm going to try it anyway because I just want to use this up and I really love this color. These are both worsted weight, superwash merino wool, but again, you can use whatever you're comfortable with. We're also going to need a zipper, but I don't want to tell you which size to use yet because we need to crochet the base of our bag first. So depending on the final size of your bag base, that'll determine what size zipper that you'll need. This bag actually measures about 9 inches across, and I used an 8-inch zipper for this one. So you want something a little bit smaller. About an inch smaller is ideal, and that'll fit best on a bag like this. And the zipper is actually measured from the pull all the way to this little end piece right here, and this is a 8-inch zipper, but again, it depends on what your final size is, but I'm using an 8-inch zipper for my project. And then we have this very cool fabric that I am using for the liner of my bag. I think I picked this up at Joann's probably 2 Halloweens ago, so I don't know if they still have anything like this, but just try and find fabric that isn't stretchy. This is like a satin, and it's very solid, so a non-stretchy fabric will work best for linings for any kind of bags. So now that we have all of that, I'm using my H hook, and that's 5mm, and we are going to start with the background color. So the chart lists 30 stitches in the repeat, but you can also use 15 stitches. So when you're calculating something, you don't need to use all 30 stitches. You can stop halfway if you want to make your bag smaller or a little bit bigger. Like let's say you do your foundation chain and you think that yours is a little bit small, you can add 15 more or 30 more. It is up to you. But for mine, I am going to do 30 stitches 3 times. So I'm going to do 90 stitches, and then we're going to connect the round. So however you cast on is perfectly fine with me. But I am going to begin and chaining 90. Okay, now I have my 90 chains, and if you want to take a look and see if 90 is good for you, this will be without pulling it or stretching it when it's loose like this. This is just about how wide the base of your bag is going to be. So if you think yours should be a little bit longer or shorter, you can adjust at this point, add either 15 more chains or take out 15 chains, totally up to you. But this right here with 90 is going to give you 3 sets of eyes for the front and 3 sets of eyes for the back. So once you have the number that you like, then we are going to chain 1 and insert your hook into the second chain from the hook and start single crochet in every stitch all the way across to the end. So you will have 90 single crochet across this chain. And just keep going to the end. Okay, now we are going to take row 1 and turn it into round 1 by connecting to the beginning here. I apologize if I sound stuffy. I have had a cold for like 2 weeks and it is just not going away. So again, I apologize if I sound a little weird. Anyway, I'm going to fight through it. So make sure your first row isn't twisted anywhere. So make sure that this first part here does not have any twists. And we're going to take the beginning and we are going to connect it from the back. I have another tutorial about this, but I am going to show you again in this video how to crochet in the round with hidden seams. So in order to do that, it could be a little easier for you if you want to use a stitch marker just to hold these two sides together from the bottom, but I'm going to do it without the stitch marker. Ooh, taking some chances here. So what you need to do for that is you need to take your hook out. I'm going to pull a little loop. And we are going to want to insert our hook from the back into those first 2 loops, into both loops of the first stitch. So we're going to turn this around because it's a little bit easier to get our hook in from that way. So we have our loop here, the yarn is facing the back, and now we want to get our hook into those first 2 loops of the very first stitch. So insert your hook from the back like this, and now we can add this loop back onto our hook, and we are going to pull it tight to make it a little bit easier to pull it through. So now we're tightened and we are just going to pull that loop through both of those loops, and that's it. Now we turn it around to the front and we are connected. So now the top is connected and this is a little loose down here, but what I'm going to do is we're going to skip that for now. We're going to add round 2 and we're going to add the green next. So this next round will be whatever color you want for the eyes. So we are going to cast on, when we have our hook already on here, we're going to cast on with our new color. So I'm just going to add the green here. And when you have green on your hook and purple on your hook, we're going to tighten the purple a little bit. And we're going to slip stitch through, but don't pull all the way through so the knot comes through. Make sure you stop before that knot comes all the way through. And we're going to tighten the purple again to make sure that that knot stays on the left side, or if you're left-handed it's going to be on the right side, but make sure that that stays on this side. And now all we need to do is chain 1 and we are ready to begin round 2. And now round 2 is just row 2 in the chart, which is all single crochet stitches. Do not crochet over the tail. We're going to use that later when we're connecting the bottom. Our very first stitch for round 2 is directly in front of your hook here. So this stitch right back there, top back loop, single crochet, that is your first stitch. And we're going to add single crochet stitches all the way around, and I will meet you on the other side. And once you've finished round 2, we can connect the bottom here. You see there's like a big gap and it's just connected at the top. We're going to close that up. So before we do that, again, make sure that this is not twisted anywhere, and if it is, you can twist it back the way it should be right there. So let's take our hook out, pull a little loop there so it doesn't unravel, and we are going to turn this upside down. So now the tail ends are at the top. So if you see here, we have the tail end from the beginning chain, and what we're going to do is just wrap it from this side to that side using our hook. So insert your hook from the front to the back into this very first stitch on this side, and we are just going to pull the tail through to the front. So now it's facing the front and we've closed it on that side. Now we're going to take this tail and put it back on this side. So insert your hook from the back to the front. Now we're on this side. And just in that first stitch right there. And we're going to pull the tail through so it is on this side. Just like that. So it's not secure yet, we just have it wrapped around. Now to secure it, we're going to tie this tail end to the green tail end on the inside. So we'll just flip it to the inside and with a square knot tie these two together, and that will hold it in place. And that's that. So now we can flip it back around. And now the bottom is closed and there's a little knot on the inside. And guess what? We don't need to weave in any tails for this one because we're adding a liner. So that's going to hide any tails that you have. Okay, so now we are ready to join round 2 from the back and switch colors back to purple. So to do that, we're going to switch it back. So we are looking at the back. We're going to insert our hook into the first stitch. This is the chain that we did. We're not doing that one. We're going into the first stitch. And you can kind of see from the front, this is the very first stitch. Insert your hook into the first 2 loops, just like that. So there's the chain, there's the very first single crochet stitch. And now we're going to take our big loop, put it back on the hook and tighten it and pull through. And now we can turn it back to the front. And the green is joined, and we are going to switch back to purple. And all we do is we slip stitch with the purple, and we tighten the green in the back. Nice and tight. Now we are ready to start round 3, and before we start, always chain 1. Round 3 will be row 3 in the chart, and your very first stitch will be down here in front of your hook. And try and keep your green and purple separated because they will get tangled and it gets a little annoying when you're going around and around and they're twisting on each other. So anyway, I'm going to get the green over there. Now we are working with row 3, and row 3 starts with a double crochet directly down here into purple. We're going to double crochet down here. So let's do that. And now the next two stitches is a decrease that ends with a single crochet. So whenever you see 2 D's together in the chart, that means it's a decrease, and it will end with a single crochet stitch if the second stitch has a line above it, which this one does. So let's add our decrease in the next 2 stitches. If you haven't done decreases before, I recommend checking out my special stitches tutorial that goes over all of the stitches in detail. So there's our decrease. So then the single crochet after that will go back here. This is right above the second decrease right here. So here's our decrease stitch with the single crochet directly above that stitch right there. So now our next 2 stitches are single because the boxes are blank. So 1, 2, and then our next stitch is another decrease, but this one starts with a single crochet because that one has the line above it. So we'll start with a single, and then the decrease starts directly below it, and so right below the single crochet stitch, let's add our decrease in the next 2 stitches. Just like that. And then our next stitch is double crochet down here in the purple. and then another decrease that ends with a single above the last stitch. So just like the first stitch in the row, we'll add that in here, and we'll add the single right above the last stitch. So now these are angling inwards that way, and then our next two stitches are single. And then another decrease, starting with a single crochet in the next stitch, with our decrease directly below that stitch. Just like that. So now this one is angling to the left, so we'll have hidden stitches in there, but we'll get to that. And then the next stitch is double crochet, and that finishes the first sequence of 15 stitches. So this goes up to that bold line, and now the next 15 stitches to finish the 30 stitches across, we have 15 DCs. So nothing special here, just count 15 double crochet, and that will give us our 30 stitches across for the repeat. So I will add those in. And this is what the very first repeat should look like. We have the first 15 stitches over here, and then we have another 15 stitches that are all double crochet. And if you remember, the first section here, this ended with a double crochet right before that line, so that line is right here. You're actually going to have 17 double crochet across, because this ends with a double crochet, and then when you start the repeat again, the repeat starts with double crochet. So if you're going super quick and you want to just remember, you're doing the cat eyes, and then we have 17 double crochet before you start another decrease to start the cat eyes over here. So I am going to, off camera, add this repeat 2 more times, so we'll have 3 in total all the way around, and I will see you on this side to connect and switch colors again. Okay, here we are at the end of round 3, and we're ready to connect. I will show you once again how to connect the rounds and switch colors, and then after that you can rewatch the video if you still need help with working in the round. So we make a loop, pull out our hook. We're going to insert our hook into the 2 loops of the very first stitch. So from the back into those 2 loops, and you can see that is the top of the double crochet. So now we will put the loop on our hook and tighten it and slip stitch through both of the loops, and now we can turn back around to the front, and now that is connected there, and we can switch colors to go back to green, and all we do for that is slip stitch. So just pull through a loop, and then we are going to tighten the purple in the back nice and tight. And now to start round 4, we chain 1, and we are ready to go. Okay, so the first stitch in round 4 is a single crochet, which will be right below where your hook is. So the top back loop, 1 single crochet, and now we are going into a double diagonal down. And I know that sounds a little scary, but it's basically just 2 diagonal stitches, but they're together. And you can kind of just break it down by looking at the symbols in the chart. The slash means a skip, the X means a DC, and then the one that looks like a half check is going to be a DC with a single crochet directly above it. So if we look nice and close here, this top stitch, this is the top of the decrease, this is what we're skipping. And then the next stitch is a DC, and where do we put that DC? Well, that is a hidden stitch in there. That is where we're putting that DC stitch. So we're going to double crochet inside here where that decrease stitch is kind of hiding the stitch right there. So we are going to DC in there. So you can see already that stitch is on an angle. So now we're going to add another stitch right next to it. This is the next stitch will be another DC. And then we're finishing the stitch with a single crochet directly above it. So back here in the back loop only, add our single crochet. And there we have a double diagonal down, so you can see both of the DCs are slanted that way. And now the next stitch is a decrease that ends with a single crochet. And again, you're looking and going, I don't really see two stitches here. This is the next stitch, and then it's in here. Here we go. So this is 1, 2 stitches that we're going to add our decrease in there. So let's add our decrease in those 2 stitches. So again, that one is in a hidden stitch in here. This is what makes all the curves and angles. So we have our decrease, and that single crochet stitch is going to be directly above the last DC right here, directly above. And that is what that stitch ends up looking like. So you're adding a decrease inside another decrease. I know it looks a little wild, but it's pretty simple once you get going with it. And this gets repeated over and over and over again. Okay, the next 3 stitches are single crochet. So we'll add those. 1, 2, and 3. And we come across another decrease, and where do those go? The very first one will be in here. If you push that decrease, these 2 stitches will have the decrease stitch, but we're starting with a single crochet. So add the single, and then directly below it, starting in there, we're going to add our decrease in the next 2 stitches. Just like that. So now this one's angling that way to the left. And let's add our double diagonal up going in this direction, and that starts with a single crochet in the next stitch, a double crochet directly below that stitch down here in the green. So add a DC, and now our next DC, you can't see it because it is behind this decrease. So this is where our next DC will go, in here. So add the double crochet in there. So now we have 2 double crochet on an angle, and we're skipping the next stitch, and that stitch that we're skipping is the top of the decrease that was purple here. That's the stitch we're skipping. So the next one will be right over here where the regular DC is. That's where our single crochet will go. And that's what that eye looks like. So here are our 2 eyes so far, and our next 15 stitches are all single crochet. So I'm going to add 15 single crochet after this one. So we'll add 15, and then row 4 will repeat again after these 15 single crochet. And because this row is super weird with a lot of hidden stitches, I'll show you again real quick just in case you missed it the first time. So after we have our 15 single crochet, then we're adding 1 more single. So in total there'll be 17 single crochet, and we are skipping the top of this decrease, and we are starting with 2 DCs, one after the other. The first one is in that hidden stitch, and then we have another one right next to it, and finish the double diagonal down with a single crochet on top. Then in the next 2 stitches, one of them being hidden, we have another decrease that ends with a single crochet. I'll put that in there and add that single, and then we have 3 single crochet across the middle here. And then another decrease that starts with a single, so add 1 single, and the decrease will be down here directly below in these 2 stitches. If you move that decrease over, you will see it. So let's add that decrease, and then a double diagonal up in the next 2 stitches, which starts with 1 single, a double crochet directly below it, then another double crochet in here. If we move that decrease over, you will see it. And then we are finishing by skipping the top of the decrease, and this is where our next stitch will go, and that is a single. And then the next 15 stitches will be single, and we will repeat that one more time on that side, but this is what that looks like so far. And I'm going to go ahead and finish this round off camera, and I will see you to start round 5. Okay, so I've gone ahead and connected round 4 and switched colors to purple. And before we start round 5, don't forget to chain 1. And the very first stitch in round 5 will be a double crochet, which is this stitch right down here in front of our hook, down in purple. We'll add a DC there. The next 2 stitches are single, 1, 2, up here, and then we have a double crochet, which is fun because it's in there, right in the middle of the eye. That's where we're adding our next DC in here. And the next stitch will be a skip and 2 DCs in the same stitch. And this is the stitch we're skipping right there. Where does the 2 DCs go? Well, we're going to push this one over, and it's in there. That right there is where we're adding 2 DCs. So this will push the eye over and give a nice little point, make it real moody looking. So we'll add our 2 DCs right there. And that's what one of the eyes looks like. All right, the next 3 stitches are double crochet, plain and simple. So 1, 2, and 3. And then our 2 DCs in the same stitch, once again, will be in this hidden stitch. So move that over, and there is where we're putting 2 double crochets. So 1 and 2, same stitch. And we are skipping up here. The next stitch is our DC that goes in there. So we're going to move those stitches aside, and you'll see where to put your hook. This is where that DC will go. Just like that. Next 2 stitches are single, 1, 2, in the top, 1, 2, and the next stitch is a double crochet, which is this stitch right here, down here in purple, double crochet. And that is what the first 15 stitches will look like. So there are our cat eyes. And we are just going to continue this row. The next 15 stitches again are all double crochet. So I will add those in there. And just like in row 3, this would be 17 double crochet because the last stitch was a double and the first stitch was a double. And now we're back to that next set of eyes. All we're going to do is just repeat those stitches again. And I'm going to go ahead and finish this row for the next 2 sets of eyes here. Okay, I've finished round 5. I've connected it and switched colors, and let's start on round 6. Don't forget, start with 1 chain, and our very first stitch will be single crochet directly in front of the hook. And this row is entirely single crochet, so we are just going to go all the way around with all single crochet stitches. And if you're looking at the chart and you're like, well, this looks like all background stitches, it's not. It's the eye color. What you need to make sure you are paying attention to is the numbered column will tell you which color you'll be crocheting the entire row with. So this one, because row 6 is in white, that is color B, which is the eye color. So we will be alternating every single row up to the last row. And here's round 6 done and connected. I've switched to purple, and we are going to start row 7, but this one is basically exactly the same as row 3, except for we're starting with all of these double crochet stitches right up here, and then the eyes for this part will be in between this section here. So I'm going to go ahead and add the first 15 stitches in this round, which will be all double crochet stitches. And now this is where we will add those eyes. From stitch 16 through 30 will go in here, and because it's exactly the same as row 3, I am not going to show you how to do that because it is exactly the same. So from this point, I am going to finish this off camera. What you'll want to do is follow the chart through row 9 and then start the pattern over from row 2, which will be exactly like this row right here. And I am going to continue adding rows 2 through 9 over and over and over again until we have 3 eyes on this side. So this would be the first section will be 1. This will be 2, and then this stops at round 5. So when you get to round 5, we will meet back up here and we will finish the top of this bag. But also, if you want to make it a little bit wider, you can also continue, instead of stopping at row 5, you can continue all the way to row 9 to add another section here, and that'll make this have 3 eyes at the top here. And if you see I change colors or end up doing a different one, it's because I ran out of yarn. I'm like really living on the edge here because this is like literally barely enough for this project, but I just want to see if I can use it up. Okay, so a little bit of a progress report. I finished one chart and I weighed what I have left, and we have about half an ounce of yarn left, so there's no way I'm gonna have enough yarn to, in this color to finish this bag. So at this point I'm gonna pull it out, and I think I'm gonna use this purple color instead, and I think these guys actually look pretty good together too. Oh, and before I forget, this one is actually Plymouth Yarns, and it is worsted merino superwash, and I have weighed it. I know this is a full skein already, and we will have plenty of yarn even though we only need about 70 yards. So let's start over. Just kidding, I'm gonna do this totally off camera. You don't have to watch me do another one. Okay, so I have finished the base of this bag using new yarn, and I have connected the very last round. And all we need to do now is, still using the same color, we're going to add one more round of single crochet stitches just to give it a finished edge. Plus it's easier to attach a zipper when you have an extra row. So that is what we're going to do, and all you really need to do is just continue around Don't forget, chain 1 first, and we're just going to add single crochet stitches in the top loops only all the way around to the beginning. So chain 1 and just go right into the front stitch without changing back to green. We're just going to use this purple one. Okay, now that we have our last row added, all we need to do is chain 1 to finish this round and tighten it, and we can cut the purple, and we can also cut the green. I'll leave maybe about 5 or so inches of a tail. Let's pull through this purple and let's turn it into the inside so we can finish this off. So if you see, this last stitch that we just finished right here is a lot further away from the last time we used this green color. So what I like to do is weave this tail in this seam here so it is right next to this green one, so when we tie a knot it's not pulling. Let me show you what I mean. If we were to tie a knot from the green to the purple, it would pull it down, and we don't want that to happen. We want this to be secured together, but not so it's pulling. So if we tie it closer to this side down here, it'll look a lot better. So I'm just going to thread a needle and weave this right into the seam here, just so we're right next to the green tail end right there. And we can just do a square knot to finish that off. And if you want, you can weave these in, but since we're doing a liner, you don't need to, because you're not going to see it at all. I'm going to trim these a little bit. And that is it for the end there. So that's where we are at with our bag. And let's go ahead and close up the bottom. And what we need to do is turn this inside out. So we are looking at the bottom at the top. And all we're going to do is slip stitch the bottom closed through both of these, starting at the seam side. So just insert your hook into both sides and cross both right here. So I'm going through both loops on this side and both loops on that side as well, just to close up the bottom. And we can attach our yarn. I'm using purple for the bottom, even though it's slip stitches and it's going to be on the inside, so it doesn't even really matter what color you use to close up the bottom. But I like to start with a knot so we can secure the yarn here. And insert our hook back into that hole right there. And we can start adding slip stitches all the way across. Like I said, 2 loops on this side and 2 loops on this side. There it is. Hard to see in the very first stitch where you're putting your hook, but I got that one. So we'll just slip stitch here. And we're going to continue all the way across in every stitch to the end on this side right there. And when you're finished with all of your slip stitches and you come to the end, all you need to do is chain 1 and tighten it. And because this is a bottom seam, let's chain 1 again and tighten it again, and we can cut and pull through. And that finishes the bottom of our bag here. So we can go ahead and turn this right side out. Again, if you want to weave in the tails, you can, but because they're going to be hiding, who cares? I'm going to leave mine just as they are and just make sure that they are tucked in when we add the lining and the zipper. So here we go. That's what this looks like, all finished at the bottom. And now we're going to take some measurements so we know how big to cut the lining for the inside of this bag. So the one I have here came to about 8.5 inches wide. So for this one I am going to use an 8-inch zipper. And this one is about 4 inches long. So we are going to double the height and cut a piece of fabric that's double the height and the same width as the actual zipper. Again, you want to find a zipper that is a little bit smaller than the opening of your little bag right there. I'm going to do 9 inches for mine. My zipper, the total length from like end to end is 9.5. So I'm going to cut my fabric to about 9 because we don't need to go all the way to the ends of the tape here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my fabric to 8 by 9 inches and I will be right back. So I have my piece of fabric all cut. This one is, again, 8 inches long by 9 inches wide, but yours will depend on the actual measurements of your bag. So I can actually put the bag aside for now, and we are just going to work with the liner and with the zipper. So with your fabric facing up, so the back side will be down against the table, we're going to take our zipper and actually place it right on top of your fabric, also facing up. And we are going to align the edge of the zipper with the edge of the fabric at the very top, and we are going to pin it down in place. But I am just going to go and pin this in place, and I am positioning my pins facing up, so when I am running it through the sewing machine this way, then I can easily pull the pins out and they're not facing the wrong way. So now that the top of the fabric is pinned onto the zipper, I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and quickly add stitches along here. I like to keep it, the foot of the sewing machine is actually right along this line, and just try and keep a straight line as close as you can to this outside edge here where these pins are. Well, I decided to sew this off camera because I couldn't get a really good angle with the sewing machine. Hope that's okay. But I used black thread, so it is completely invisible on a black zipper. You might want to use whatever zipper color you're using. Try and find a thread that matches the zipper. And I'm just going to show you when you attach it from this side here. This is what you're going to be seeing on the inside, a nice straight seam, and there's no stitches showing. So now that we have that connected, we are going to attach the other side. We're going to turn this upside down and we're going to attach the zipper from the bottom now. So we're going to fold this up like this. So the zipper is still facing up, we're not turning or anything. And we are going to line it up to the bottom of the fabric here, and we're going to pin it in place so it is right against the edge of the fabric, and make sure it's also centered between the ends here. And it is okay if the edge of the tape from the zipper is sticking out the side. That is perfectly fine. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this in place. Again, when you are using a sewing machine and you're going to be using it this way, you're going to want your pins to be facing the right direction so you can easily get them out. So now I'm just going to pin this side in place, and then I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and sew this side on as well. Okay, I have both sides connected, and if this is what yours looks like, then you are on the right track. And if you want to make yours look extra clean, we can iron the bottom so it has a nice straight seam right here. That'll make this a whole lot easier. Don't worry, my iron's not actually on. I'm going to do it off camera. But if you have a nice clean crease here, then when we close up the sides, it's a lot easier. But I'm going to do that off camera. So once you have that done, you can then flip this inside out. And we're going to do a little bit more ironing. Open it up, and we can run our iron down this seam right here to make this nice and straight. So you can run an iron right along in here, and same on this side right here. You can run your iron along this seam right here to make that nice and straight. I'm going to do that off camera so I don't burn myself while looking on the camera. And then once you have that done, we're going to flip it back inside out and we will close up the sides. So at this point, we can go ahead and close up the sides and make sure that both sides are even across. And we are going to sew up to the tape on the zipper, but not on the zipper itself. Just the lining we are going to be sewing together, because we still need these pieces right here. You're going all the way up and stopping right before you hit the tape here. And again, we're going to do the same thing for this side. Sometimes it's easier to fold the tape up so it is out of the way, and then line this up and make sure that those two ends meet. You can start from the seam and close this up. And once you have the sides sewn up, we are ready to insert the liner into our bag. And if you have any loose threads, like this fabric for some reason is just, it just keeps fraying on the edges. If you have any loose threads or fraying fabric, give that a little trim before we put it in there, because it is a little difficult to get rid of them once you have the bag attached to the zipper. Anyway, so now we can take our bag and insert the liner inside the bag. And to make it easier to work with, we're going to open the zipper so we can attach using some pins. And we are going to start with the seam side here and line up the tape directly underneath that first seam. We're going to take the tape and make sure we're lining it up right at the seam at the edge of the bag. And if you can see, I'm crossing the tape so when we stitch across, it's not going to be sticking out the top. This will be aligned going down. So we can start by pinning this little corner in place. And then working your way around, just adding some pins along here to make it easier to sew this part together. And this is just to make it a little bit easier to hold on to when you're adding stitches. And when we get to this end of the zipper, again, we're going to fold in these little tabs at the very end and make sure it is lined up with the very corner of your bag. And we are going to pin one side down. This part is a little tricky because the zipper ends right there, but do your best and just pin it in place, and we can maneuver around it when we are hand sewing this. And I'm just going to flip it around to this side and quickly pin this side in place as well. And now that we have it all pinned in place, my least favorite part, I can't stand pins because I feel like every single time I use pins I get pricked by one of them. Anyway, we're going to start with this side over here because this pin right here is usually the culprit of the ones that hit me the most. So we are going to start and insert our needle from the back, and we can remove this pin and secure this corner in place. And yes, this part we are going to be hand sewing because it is a lot easier to get nice and close to these little corner edges right here and here instead of fighting with a sewing machine. That's just how I found it. It's a lot easier. So I have double thread a needle using black thread. I want this to be the same color as the zipper, and don't worry, you're not going to see it on the front even though we are sewing through the front. We are going to see it on the zipper side though, so make sure that we are matching that. I've also tied a knot at the end. Now we are ready to start hand sewing the lining onto our bag here, starting with this nasty pin right here. So from the inside, we are going to insert our needle from the inside to the outside, and we are going to make sure the needle is underneath this last row of single crochet stitches. So we are adding stitches underneath this whole row right here, and it is going to be completely camouflaged in between those stitches. So anywhere where you can stick your needle all the way through and have it hopefully come out right under here, that would be perfect. And then we're just going to pull through. And now we are going to back stitch. So if you can see the thread came out. This way we're going to go one stitch over right here, and we are going to put our needle back to the front and come out right underneath the next stitch. Let's get rid of this one. So this is where we're at right here. This is where the thread came through on the bottom. We're going back one stitch and over one. And just pull through. And following those steps, we can just keep going. We're going to where the thread came out, we're going to go back one stitch through the back and out through the front of the next stitch. And we are just going to continue back stitching all the way across. And take out these pins as you're going because they get in the way. And we're just going to make sure that the top of the crocheted panel is directly underneath where the zipper is, and all of our stitches are going to go right underneath that single crochet row right along there. And I am going to continue all the way to the other side of the zipper, and I'll show you how to sew that side. And I just want to stop real quick and show you what the inside should look like. We are adding all of these stitches in the zipper portion and not on the actual liner, so you won't see any of these stitches unless you look really, really close. But that is why I like using the same color thread as the zipper and not matching the actual bag. And if you're anything like me and you've been saying all your life that you hate sewing, all I have to say is just take your time. The more you practice, the easier it gets. And also, if you are lining everything up correctly, and again, just take it slow, it's not so bad. And I think it comes out really nice when you have a little bit of patience with it. Do I think crocheting is easier than sewing? Oh, 100,000 times over, yes. So once you get to the other end of the zipper on this side, it does get a little tricky, but like I said, just take your time with it. We are going to add stitches right to the end and make sure that the tape is folded down underneath the crocheted part, and this part will go over the zipper, and we will add stitches this way to connect those two parts there. So I'm going to add one more stitch on this side to get to the very end. Now we're just going to add a few stitches this way. So back into the front, across, and we'll be grabbing the tape on the inside, just like this. Hope you can see it. This is where my thread came out, and this is where we're putting our needle across. So this kind of seals it up. And then we can continue on along this side. And just back stitching here. And make sure that the crocheted panel is still lined up with that zipper along the edge here. You don't want to let it slip down here. Make sure it is nice and tight to the edge. Of course, at any point where you feel like you're running out of thread, you can go ahead and add a little bit more. I like to stop after this zipper part so it doesn't get in the way, and then I will stop and add more thread to my needle at that point, just because it's a little bit easier to tie over there instead of fighting with underneath of the zipper. So I still have a bit of thread left, but just to be safe, I want to make sure that we add enough so we can get all the way across the end of this side and have plenty to even go a little bit further, and we'll hide the knot on the inside in this corner right there. So I'm going to stop and pull my thread onto the inside and hide a knot right in here, right along the edge. And then I'm going to add more thread and continue across. So make sure that that knot is not in the way. So I think that's good enough of a knot right there. I'm going to cut it pretty close so you don't see a giant tail sticking out. I'm going to add more thread, and then I'm actually going to start the new thread a little further back here, just so we don't have two sets of knots, like one where you ended and then another where you begin. So your beginning thread will be over here, and you'll have stitches here already, but just hide that knot a little bit more. We're going to put it all the way back here, and then we will continue all the way across. And here we are at the very end of the zipper on the other side, and I'm just going to continue adding a few stitches to the very edge where the seam is, and then we will add some stitches just like on the other side across this way, and we're going to hide that last knot to finish it off over there. And again, just make sure that the tape end of the zipper is facing down and on the inside and out of the way, and we will be done. Does get a little tricky sometimes though, because the tape has that hard edge so it doesn't fray. If you move your needle around, you should be able to get through it without a problem. And we are just about done. I'm just going to insert my needle from the front to the back and make a knot right along here. And we will be done with this lining. And just like that, we are finished. So let's zip this guy up and see how it looks. Look at that. We sewed a zipper pouch. How exciting. I'm really excited to add more linings to some of my other bags, especially like the bigger ones, and make the crocheted portions last a little bit longer and not stretch out as much. So yeah, we're all done. I hope you enjoyed making a zipper pouch with me, and please make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you for the next tutorial or the next video that I put out on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and happy spooky season.